Hi, this is Peggy from RAW. So our guest today is Ramy Nassar. So Ramy is a multitasker. So his main role, one of his main role is to be co-founder and chief experience officer at Olive, which is a fintech. And he's going to tell us more about that. So thank you so much for being with us today and looking forward to hearing your perspective on the new normal in financial services.
Thank you, Peggy. It's my pleasure to be here.
Do you want to tell us a few words on Olive and what you're doing, and then we'll jump in on the questions?
Yeah, so Olive is a B2B fintech platform that, above all else, helps enterprise organizations help their customers save for something big. We've got a major savings gap in Canada and the US, around the world. People are not prepared for big purchases, for their retirement, for rainy day funds. I think we've seen that exasperated by the pandemic going on now. And between tools like card-linked offers, cashback rewards from merchants, and employer-provided accelerators, the idea behind it is to help people help themselves save better and faster and more responsibly.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Definitely something we all need, especially in North America, I would say. So we cannot discuss anything without having a COVID conversation. So from your perspective, what will be the major lasting impacts of COVID on the financial services industry?
I hope that it leads to organizations, whether big or small, being a little bit more prepared. Um, I don't know how to say this without sounding a little bit judgmental, but it almost seems mind-boggling that so many organizations, both in financial services and outside, were so unprepared for even just a couple of quarters of tough times. And we think about consumers having this responsibility to save, whether in Canada through something like a TFSA, even something called a rainy day fund. The premise we were all taught, take 10% of your paycheck and you put it into your savings account. These organizations that, sorry to say, have been making billions of dollars quarter over quarter, caught so quickly in even just the early stages of a downturn. So I hope that the lasting effect is starting to think about longer term impacts and how different forces, pandemic was just one of the potential forces that could cause a change in the outlook for any type of organization, but in particular financial services.
Well, and that's interesting in terms of capital ratio. My second question is on regulations and policies, and anything you see that might be accelerating or changing because of COVID. So, capital ratio requirements might be one based on what you just said. Anything you see that could be interesting that we would like to see from our regulators?
Yeah, so I'll preface by saying I'm not a regulatory or compliance expert by any means, but what I would love to see, and maybe my own political views will come out here, but some of the same types of protections that, at least in Canada, we put on consumers. So, for example, let's think about stress testing with respect to mortgages to essentially protect people from themselves. Some of that same type of protection at the organizational and industry level, I think, can be beneficial, but I'm sure there are many people who would challenge me and tell me that I'm interfering with open markets and problems like that. But I think that my perspective would be that that type of thinking can be beneficial.
Yeah, I hear you with that because, and you see the difference between Canada, the US, and Europe, where Canada we tend to sit maybe in the middle, where Europe will be way more aligned with your way of thinking, while the Americans will be, "Are you insane? Of course not. I don't want to have any type of stress test on my business." But I agree. Sometimes you need to save yourself from yourself. So that's also the role of regulation sometimes.
And we all need it. Like when I do some work more in the real estate space. I do real estate development work as a hobby, so I love to buy beat up old buildings and try to breathe new life into them. And one of the things in working in that space has been just being blown away that, and I'm sorry if this sounds judgmental, but that someone making $60,000, $70,000 a year is getting approved for an $800,000 mortgage with insane debt service ratios and being tied to a mortgage for 30 or 35 years. It just doesn't fit for me, I guess, logically.
Yeah, I hear you. It's really a bet on the future, which is really a bet. Let's put it that way. So let's take a bit with this financial approach and global financial stability and order in the COVID or post-COVID world. To your point, there are, I believe, a lot of assets going to see their value reduced, which can create a lot of risk, like real estate, like we've seen in 2008. A lot of countries are taking sovereign debt, potential inflation, widening inequalities as well in developed countries and between countries. What do you see happening in terms of global stability or instability and financial order?
Yeah, I think the sad reality of this, and I believe we probably are only seeing the tip of the iceberg right now, is that ultimately the rich will become richer and the poor will become poorer. I think we're going to see even more exasperation or amplification of debt, or I guess that ratio between the wealthiest and those who need the most help, the poorest, however you want to frame it. That makes me sad. It makes me happy about what I do for a living, because I think it is not the solution, but a part of a solution for it. The other thing, I guess, at a global level, will be seeing, I think that how the world is responding with respect to pacts about distribution of vaccines and so on is an interesting, hopefully, preview of how the globe also responds with the financial support that other countries and other parts of the world, where there are billions of people who need a whole lot more help than any of us living in North America or Europe do, or the average person, let's say, in North America or Europe does. And I hope that those types of pacts go beyond just rationing vaccines for the developing world, but also think about longer term support and so on.
Yeah. I was maybe a few months ago in a virtual conference with several African presidents, and they were adamant that they needed financial support, and it's not a story of reducing the debt or whatever. Just, we don't want to have debt for supporting our people through that global pandemic that came to us, that we didn't create, so it's something we tend to forget. We have a very navel gazing type of mentality, in the sense that not only we just look at our country, but we just look at our income bracket, thinking that it's the way the world goes. But guess what, we're just a small drop in the bucket. Most people live on a few dollars per day, so we tend to forget that very much.
Yeah.
So in terms of resetting competitive positioning, what type of financial organization, and maybe what organization, Olive obviously, but will benefit from the crisis?
I hope it's the organizations that are realizing that investments into innovation and transformation are in a way more important when times are hard than they are when times are good. It's actually very easy when monies are flowing in to say, now we're going to invest into alternative futures and start thinking about things like strategic foresight and what other forces could happen. But that's when it's easiest to do. When it's hardest to do and put that money into that type of strategic transformation initiative is when cuts are being made. I've been both inside and on the periphery of a number of enterprise organizations. I won't throw any of them under the bus now, but at times when cuts have happened, whether related to a pandemic or other external factors, even just changing market conditions, that's when innovation and transformation initiatives are the first things to go, versus and I know it's a tough call to make for the person who's looking at that P&L, but that's the time that becomes the most important thing, in my opinion.
Similarly to marketing. Marketing is the first thing that goes to the window, and you're like, well, if you want to increase your top line, you need marketing, and that's what you're cutting. So it's very often short-term decision making. But back to your first point, when you have absolutely no buffer in your company and you're running quarter to quarter, you're cutting in the muscle. That's a tough one. You do a lot of work with financial institutions in one of your other activities. You're very well versed in terms of, we discuss innovation, digital transformation. Where do you see traditional financial institution go?
So I'll be honest, I've been a little surprised at some of the things that seem so basic to me when this pandemic struck. A few years ago, as part of a startup agreement with a very large FI, and we were a 3-person startup at the time, we had to indicate our pandemic preparedness plan. And we wrote, yes, we have one. We're 3 people. We don't even have like HR contracts. That same institution, who will, for pleasantness, remain nameless for today, in the first few weeks of the lockdown here in Canada, there were articles and leaked documents explaining that they didn't have VPN access for the majority of their employees, and their employees were asked to log onto the VPN before 9:30 and after 4:30. And so 3-person startups are building pandemic preparedness plans, but IT at a big organization can't support its employees on short notice. So I know we've come away since then, but I do hope that the organization look not just how the way. Uh-oh.
I'm sorry, I lost you.
Peggy, I think you have a bad connection for a second.
Yeah, I lost you for
yeah, it has a red.
I loved the parallel between having a 3-person shop asked about their pandemic plan and a large FI not being able to deliver. I worked, as you know, at large FI. It's an irony that I can totally see happening, So that's very interesting. And to keep the topic light for the last question. So what did you learn during this pandemic? Did you take new habits, new hobbies? Do we have a version 2.0 now? Can you hear me now?
I'll let you edit this. Okay, I think you're back. It was just, you've got the red warning there. Okay, I guess personally for me, if I really just break this down, I've had a renewed focus on, I basically built myself a filter, and I will now only take on work that I literally built an algorithm, a heuristic for myself. So as work comes in related to my consulting practice, to all of the fintech, at the end of the day, if I am not 2 of the 3 either having fun, having a positive impact on other people, or learning something new, if I can't check 2 of those 3 boxes off, I say no. I've said no to more things. I've said no to some, let's say, lucrative projects. It's been a bit challenging. It's actually been really challenging for me to personally to do that. But my new filter has helped me prioritize more time with family, more time with friends, and a little bit of that. And so I guess that's been my biggest, it's kind of forced me to systematize how I spend my time.
It's interesting because I didn't go as far as put in place that filter, but I'm also way more mindful of my time. Just also because, like you, I'm sure at some point you're getting burnout as well. So many calls, so many opportunities. So you need to protect yourself, your energy and your time. So I've been way more thoughtful of that, which doesn't always work very well. You always have people who are like, wow, you can spare 30 minutes. And you're like, well, you're the 10th person who've been asking me for 30 minutes this week, so it starts becoming a bit heavy on me, So I hear you. I think managing your time and your energy is something a lot of us have learned better, at least during that pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time. It was really lovely to have you and lovely to get your perspective. Have a good day.
Thank you, Peggy.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much.